Welcome everybody to AppleInsider. It is Andrew here, and you can find me on Twitter at Andrew_OSU. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe and enable the notifications so you don't miss a single video. I'm a big monitor fan. I have a stack of them in the corner of the room that I go between testing and using. And while I usually default to Apple's new Studio display, I've recently been using LG's curved ultra-wide monitor that is just so cool that I was very excited to share it with you today. So I'm going to be reviewing LG's, and let me get the name right here, UltraWide 40WP95C-W. It's a mouthful, but there is information below so you can actually find the correct monitor that I'm talking about in this video. But this is basically a 40-inch 5K2K display that's pretty fantastic in a crowded and kind of messy third-party monitor market. So let's go ahead and dive into this just a little bit deeper. As I said, this is a 40-inch monitor, though technically it only measures 39.7 on the diagonal, but we'll just round up and say 40. It has a resolution of 5120 by 2180. If we do the math on that, it gives you a pixel density of 139.97. Comparatively, Apple's 16-inch MacBook Pro comes with a pixel density of 226 ppi, so decidedly lower than something like the MacBook Pro. But when you have a screen that is so large, again, measuring almost 40 inches, you are inherently sitting just a bit further back. So we don't need quite as high of a pixel density to reach Retina resolution, but I will say going from something like Apple's 5K Studio display to this 5K2K panel with a lower pixel density, it's just not quite as sharp. I can definitely see the difference. It just feels a slight bit fuzzier in using the display versus Apple's Studio display or other Retina quality displays. Does that matter? Is it going to be a thing? Probably not. I hear it from a lot of you guys when I talk about the Studio display and its 5K panel that they don't care. You can save a lot of money by going for a 4K panel at a similar size, and I'd say you have similar thoughts here. The panel itself looks very good. It does support 98% of the P3 wide color gamut. It supports HDR, has a roughly 300 nits of brightness, which I think is on the low side. Using here in the studio, it's not too big of a deal, but if you have a very bright space or some glare going on, could be an issue. But just going back to that pixel density, I don't think it's a problem for most people. I think it's one of those things you get used to something at such high resolution, so pixel perfect, and then you go to just a lower pixel density and you can see that imperfection. But I don't think it's a deal breaker by any means, because you're not going to find many monitors that have this wonderful looking of a display in such a large screen size. Other specs include support for 1.007 billion colors, which is again 98% of the P3 wide color gamut, and supports HDR, has a 1000:1 contrast ratio, a 5 millisecond response time, and it has a refresh rate of 72 Hz. There are lower refresh rates available if you prefer to drop down to those, but it is above the 60 that we typically see. As I believe I mentioned, this does only have 300 nits of brightness, which I think is pretty okay. I mean, you're looking at phones and laptops and iPads that have much higher brightness ratings, but they're meant for being outside. When you're inside, you don't need as much brightness, and for me using it here, it hasn't been a problem. But though they are saying HDR support, I wouldn't expect a huge contrast ratio or really vivid brights and highs when watching back that HDR content. It looks very, very good, but don't expect the same thing as like the Studio display or other displays that have a much higher brightness and better contrast ratio. By the way, speaking of brightness, it does have a built-in ambient light sensor, which is handy, and it can automatically adjust its brightness for you based on the room that you're in. Typically in my use so far, I've been keeping it around 70%, but I like having the ambient brightness sensor on. That way, as I turn the lights in the studio on and off based on filming, the monitor will automatically adjust. That way it doesn't blind me or is way too dark and I have to manually adjust it. This monitor does connect over Thunderbolt 4. There is an included white Thunderbolt cable in the box, and it can deliver up to 96 watts of power to your Mac when connected. Aside from Thunderbolt, there is a downstream Thunderbolt which can be used to connect a secondary monitor or other peripheral, and you can choose to use DisplayPort or HDMI as well. Now, speaking of HDMI, there's actually 2 HDMI ports, and you can plug in 2 different sources at the same time and display them automatically side by side. This PBP mode, picture-by-picture mode, is very handy if you have something like a work laptop and a personal laptop or something like that that you want to display on the same screen. It's a really neat effect. Beyond that though, the HDMI does have lower resolution support, so you're not going to get that full resolution when you are powering up over HDMI. Outside of the ways to drive the display, this display is also able to act as a hub. There are 2 USB-A ports. These are just USB 3.1, which give about 5 gigabits per second of data. They are located down the right-hand side, which makes them very easily accessible. I like that they put them here on the right-hand side versus putting them in the back where they're harder to get to. So it's much more comfortable and easy to get to, located there on the side. Though, why aren't they USB-C? I would have much preferred USB-C ports even with USB 3.1 specs. Just Type-C would have been so much more beneficial. Oh, and there's a headphone jack, if you'd prefer to use that than the built-in stereo 10-watt speakers that sound pretty much okay. Not bad, not great. Looking at the design for a moment, I really like the design, look, and feel of this monitor. LG has done a fantastic job, and I like the build and look of this much more than its ultra-fine displays that they made to support specifically the Mac. There's a number of reasons why. First off, it just feels hefty. It is not a light monitor and stand by any means. It's definitely got some weight to it, and it gives me a little bit of hassle as I'm trying to move it around my office for filming. And you can tell a lot of that weight is coming from the stand itself because it is very sturdy and very large. It has a really nice arc going around the front that I love the look of and gives you plenty of space to keep stuff on your desk without that stand getting in the way. It's also an all-metal stand that I think looks nice and matches the aesthetic of Apple's products. Plus, the back of it, while it is plastic, is a nice white instead of that kind of ugly office blackish gray you see on the ultra-fine monitors that we've covered so many times on this channel. Now, it's also widely adjustable, so you can move it easily up and down with this little ball joint in the back. It's really nice looking. It just clips right into place on the back of the monitor, and you can rotate it left and right. You can pivot it and tilt it up and down. It can go very up, by the way. And then again, slide the monitor up and down so it gets to your perfect level. It's pretty great as far as stands go, and I was surprised at how little wiggle there was. As I kind of bounced on my desk a little bit and jiggled the display, it held very firmly in place. There's some wiggle because there's one contact point for this large monitor, but it really held its own amazingly well. Then there's the fact that this is a curved display. I really like it. It's really neat, and I've used ultra-wide monitors before, and you end up kind of like looking a lot, and this just subtle curve, it makes it more comfortable to use. It's easier on the eyes, and honestly, it's a cool effect when I go to move something and I drag it and it curves around the screen like that. It's just really neat to see. I love the fact that this is a curved monitor with just a slight arc to it. It's not over annoying where you have to like rotate your chair almost to look, but it just makes it more comfortable and you're kind of the same distance from everywhere on the display. It's very, very nice, and if you have a monitor this large, I'd highly recommend it being curved rather than just a flat panel. There's multiple resolutions you can choose for this display. I keep it at the default. Everything can get a little bit small, which if you have hard eyes, it may be tough on you. You might want to switch to a different resolution that gives you a little bit more screen real estate, but I kind of like having so much space on the screen where I can fit a lot of stuff on. I can have like my Final Cut Pro timeline across the top of the screen, still have a Twitter feed or AppleInsider there down the left, and I can put things like spreadsheets and graphs as well as notes for what I'm working on below my feed. There's just a lot of space. And taking things full screen, again, great for workflows that are very linear, so video and audio editing are perfect for this, or for using that PBP mode with 2 different pictures on this large display at the same time. It's just very handy to do. So would I recommend LG's 40-inch 5K2K Thunderbolt for display? I really would if it's something that meets your workflow. Not everybody needs an ultra-wide monitor. If you're doing something with those linear workspaces, great. If you need to put multiple things up on the screen at the same time, great. I'm a huge fan of ultra-wide monitors, but I recognize that they're not ideal for everybody. And just keep that in mind when you're deciding whether or not to pick one of these up. Overall, the picture looks great. It is vibrant. It looks amazing. It works with the Mac fantastically. It has ambient sensors, it has speakers, it works over a Thunderbolt, it has additional USB ports on there. There's just a lot of versatility in this monitor. And it's cheaper than Apple's Studio Display. Let me know what you guys think. Do you like ultra-wide monitors? Do you like curved monitors? Let me know in the comments or on Twitter at Andrew_OSU. And if you'd like to grab one of these for yourself, I've got some links with some price discounts in the description, so check those out if you're at all interested. Otherwise, stay tuned. I have a lot more videos coming your way.